This is Brent Richardson, and welcome to the Business Minutia Podcast, where our focus is on the details of business that are often passed over by traditional classes and leadership training. We focus on the stories of real people who have tried, failed, and learned through their experiences and are willing to share their lessons with others.
Brent, we are focusing on loving what you do this month on the podcast. So why do you think it is important to actually love what you do?
Well, I'd like to get up in the morning and give 100% of whatever I'm doing to whatever that is. And it's hard to give 100% to something that if you hate it.
Right.
And so why are we talking about, or what are we talking about this week, particularly related to loving what you do?
We're talking about when is it time to leave?
Yeah. When is it time to quit? Seems like an odd thing to talk about in loving what you do, but it is important, right? And maybe let's talk a little bit about why are we talking about that right now. I actually had a good friend of mine reach out to me end of last year and said, are you going to do an episode on when is it time to quit? When is it time to leave? And
we had it on the list of things we wanted to do.
We keep a long list of items we want to cover. So if you have ideas on things you'd like to cover, we like feedback. I can't get to them immediately, but this one was a good question. I thought that is a great one to cover. I'm probably not going to get into it until sometime in 2021. So let me hear about your situation. And just through talking with this friend about their scenario, and I can say now, like we're gonna leave names off to preserve the innocent here. But I can tell you that they have transitioned, are way happier with the current job they're in. I got a nice increase in salary out of the deal. I think that's okay to say. And it's just beneficial. They just wound up on top on the deal. And the more I talk to them, I realize, it's time for you to go.
But the going back and forth with him actually helped us work out this episode.
It did. We started making notes as well. So there's nothing like having to teach something to force you to learn it, really well. So.
Okay. So you are a Venn diagram guy.
I like Venn diagrams.
You have like a Venn diagram for this episode?
I do.
Explain it.
Well, I've had this conversation with other leaders that I've worked with in the past as well. When I talk about compensation, when I talk about what I want to do with my life, and it ties into when is it time to leave, I think. And the Venn diagram I think about here is this diagram. You can imagine one circle that is what someone values paying you for, what someone's willing to pay you for. That's one kind of circle.
Okay.
Another circle would be what you're good at. Okay,
and it's beautiful if those two can actually.
Absolutely, you need to align those in some way, right? And then there's another circle. It's not just a two-part. This is a three-part Venn diagram. The next one is what are you willing to or want to do? Because there are things that I'm good at and that somebody's willing to pay me for, but I don't want to do those things.
Right, and I think that is a piece that a lot of people leave out.
Yes.
I mean, because you can do something just because you can get paid for it, right? But there's a whole lot of not want to.
And it's also a marginal thing. I heard this taught in college in an economics class, and it stuck with me forever. And it's people think at the margins. People don't think about whatever job that they might have 5 years from now. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking incrementally from where they are now, thinking marginally from where they are today.
Right. And I think it may also be an age-related thing, a generation-related thing, because, now there are so many people making millions of dollars on YouTube that I think every teenager thinks, when I get older, I'm just going to be a YouTuber.
And you might. But people think in this marginal way.
Right.
And for me, it helps kind of process where I want to be and where the right fit is when I think about what somebody's willing to pay me for, what I'm good at, and what I want to do. And that sweet spot in the middle is where I want to optimize.
And I think that loyalty does play a big role in making people stay.
Yes.
Sometimes longer than they should.
Yep. Exactly. And I think there's a loyalty element. There's a complacency element. I asked him specifically, what was the thing that prevented you from leaving? Again, he's looking back at it going, I'm glad I left. So that's an interesting perspective. Psychologically, what was the thing that prevented you from leaving? There's a strong sense of loyalty there. And there's a little bit of complacency too. It takes effort and work to put yourself out there for a new opportunity.
Right.
You risk failure. You risk being rejected.
Well, and when you know what was available 5 years ago, you assume that those are the same things that would be available now. And you selected to go to none of those places 5 years ago. So you assume there are no other options.
That's right.
And that I mean, I guess is some complacency, but it's also just I have too many irons in the fire. I don't have time to go and look.
Which in
for
reality
something
is
else.
often an excuse code, or maybe it's
Right.
not in some cases, but a lot
Right.
of times I think we use it. I do for sure use it as an excuse code in those cases,
Right.
many times. And then I also ask him, what was the trigger that really broke that barrier for you? And if you look at it, I won't get into the details of his answer, but it really came down to some things that were he was forced into it. There were some things that kind of backed him into a corner
Right.
that forced this thought process. That's usually how most of us are. We're usually thinking about whatever our job is or our problem to solve or trying to be great at whatever we're doing until something happens.
Right.
Usually something occurs, and that's what we'll talk about here in a second. But what are the things that cause us to want to leave?
And that made him go look for the opportunity.
That's right.
And the opportunity was huge.
Yes.
And then he had to convince himself, okay, is there any reason that I should stay?
That's right. That's right. That's right. So let's talk about what drives us to change. And for me, number one, it's a lack of appreciation. If you're in a spot, again, like Venn diagram, what somebody values paying you for. If
Right.
you're in a spot where you don't feel valued, that's the first thing people will bail. And that's what the official teaching is. People leave a boss. That's
Right.
what most people will say if people will leave a boss. Now, that sounds so personal. People won't necessarily leave a boss as much as they'll leave a boss that maybe not communicating effectively. So as bosses, we have to be really good at this. We have to be communicating what value they bring. And I don't mean just saying, we're happy with everybody. Your job is not to just let any kind of performance get by. You have to actually set the expectations, but you've got to remind people of what where they're strong and what you appreciate about them, right? So a lack of appreciation is one that first came to my mind.
Right. And then you have the lack of autonomy. Like the boss is just like all over me all the time. And doesn't trust me with anything.
Micromanagement.
Yeah.
Man, that's a big one for me. If you're all over me, so I know people will be listening to this that work with me, and they're listening to it because they see the name of the episode and they want to know if I'm going to be leaving, and they want to know what I think about my boss. So let me just get that out of the way. I don't give out good boss certificates. Like I don't, but I actually do have a really great boss. And what I love about my current boss is he does give that autonomy, and I don't get micromanaged.
Right.
The people that have micromanaged me in the past, I'm looking for a way out.
Right. And that is almost like a sign of appreciation to you.
It's a trust.
It's a trust.
It is.
Right.
It is.
So there are these things that are kind of within the realm of control of the organization, but there are also things that can drive you to leave that has absolutely nothing to do with your work. It can be a location change. You need to move, like physical locations. Maybe a spouse is moving or something like that.
Organizational changes.
Yeah.
I've seen, I don't know, in my 20 years at my company, I've seen the direction change so many times.
Right.
And that's a good thing. The market has shifted and we're shifting to go win. Right. But sometimes when the market shifts and we shift to go win, your expertise is no longer as significantly
You are
valued.
no longer in that same spot in the Venn diagram.
Yes. Their willingness to pay you for your skill set has changed.
Right.
Because the market shifted.
Right.
You can be mad at the company, but the company doesn't care. The company's it's an entity. It's trying to go win, right?
Right. And then sometimes there are just like what we call insurance events, right? You have a baby, or you're going to school, or you're getting a divorce, or whatever is going on in your life that requires a change in status.
What about just a new opportunity? Sometimes opportunities just fall in your lap and you're not thinking about change, but you go, well, that's pretty attractive. That might be a good move.
Well, and sometimes it's a passion change.
Yeah.
I know that when I left the corporate position I was in, the position that I went to go take was something that it was never going to be in that couldn't be filled in a corporate environment, right? I mean, I went to a completely different field. So I think that sometimes there's a passion that
Sure.
leads to a new opportunity.
I've had that as well. I had a really great engineer just came to my office one day and goes, I want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Whoa,
I can't
holy
compete
cow.
with that.
I can't compete with that.
You need to go do
He's like, I
you.
just don't feel like what I'm doing
Right.
is accomplishing what I dreamt about when I was a kid.
Right.
And what I dreamt about was having an impact on people's lives. And when I see these doctors doing that, I go, that's what I want to go do. And he's a doctor today.
Right. I've
And I'm
discovered
like,
my purpose, and it's not
That's
here.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't gripe about that. He was super. He was an outstanding engineer, and he's probably a great doctor. But there are those kinds of things that compel us to change as well. I
Okay,
agree.
so what are the things that compel you to stay stay at a job?
Yeah, relationships is number one for me. The relationships with the people that I work with.
Right.
Right. That's valuable to me. So working with really great, competent people, working with people that I enjoy being around, that's important. I think a strong sense of purpose about what I'm doing. I enjoy helping people, and I have my own motivations, right? So I have my listed out, and I know I'm not going to get into them here, but I know what mine are.
Right.
And those things, as long as I'm getting those itches scratched, and I have an opportunity to go fulfill some sense of purpose
Right.
about what I'm doing, then I'm motivated to stay.
Okay, those are the good things, but there are also some other things that keep us where we are,
What do
right?
you mean?
Fear.
Yeah, fear of failure, right? I've talked to many people that have been like, I have this really great idea for a business that I want to go run. Well, why aren't you doing that? Well, and it's fear of failure.
Right.
It really is, right? And I can tell you, if I had a really great idea and I felt passionate about it, I would struggle with it too. I could see it, and then you got to go try to attack
Well,
it.
right, and it's one thing when you're 20 and single and can do whatever, but as soon as you start having little dependents in your life and people are depending on you and
Yeah.
all of that,
It
all of a
changes.
sudden, yeah,
It changes things, and your risk change, your willingness to
Absolutely.
take risk changes. But again, you can still tackle these small pieces, right? Okay, sidebar. I have 2 different people that I've talked to in the last week that I cannot share their names, but they are starting their own businesses.
Right.
While they
Right.
continue to work and do whatever it is they do, they have side hustles
Right.
that are turning into small businesses that
Right.
they're getting rolling. I'm super excited about both of them.
Right.
Involved marginally in one. And I can't talk about them yet, but I'll just put a little teaser in there. Eventually, we'll be able to probably talk about that and maybe even have them on the podcast. So anytime somebody finds those kinds of passions that they can go attack, I think that's
Right.
a really cool thing. And because you're attacking that fear of failure.
right. But you have the fear piece. You also have just the complacency, the
Yeah.
laziness.
And this is mine. This is the biggest negative version of the compulsion to stay for
Right.
me is I can get really complacent, and I can get where things are going well and I'm in a spot where I have a good boss or I know my chain of command and I get comfortable, and then I need to get stirred, and I've been bad about sitting too still for too long.
right.
Yeah. So there are times when it's good to stay, times when it's good to go. Let's talk a little bit about why a person shouldn't leave. When should you stay and not be bailing?
Okay, before we get into that, I'm curious. I don't think your listeners are going to have an understanding of this. How many times a week, a month, a year are you ready to quit?
It used to be worse. I don't have it as much anymore.
Okay.
But I have had some jobs and some phases of my career
You've
where
had-
I used to joke that if you have one bad day, just
Right.
move on. Just
Right.
move on. And you get 3 bad days in a row, okay, something's going on. And when you start to string a week or two together, then you start going, it's time to get my resume polished up.
Right. I almost look at as a relationship. Your job is kind of like a relationship. And if you're keeping on your calendar, this was a bad day, this was a bad day, this was a bad day, when all those bad days start lining up,
Yeah.
you might start thinking about leaving that relationship.
And here I think to me is the crux of the discussion to me. I think this really boils down to one key point is what are you running from? And if you're not running from something, then you probably should entertain the idea of another opportunity because you're probably leaving from a place of health. What I don't think is a good idea is to run from, we're going to go through some possible examples of why somebody might leave and why they're not good ideas.
Right.
But ultimately it comes down to what are you running from?
Right. And I think we have the assumption that when we are leaving a job, we are running towards something. But not always.
Yeah, and I've only had a few cases when I wanted to leave and I was thinking about leaving when I was leaving from a position of health. In fact,
Yeah.
I think maybe 3 times I've ever left have been from those positions. Now, I've had hundreds of cases where I felt like I wanted to leave, but they were not from positions of healthy places because I was running from something, right?
Right.
And so, but what are the kinds of examples? Running from a bad day. Okay, like quitting after a bad day makes no sense.
Right.
Right? Solve your problem. How do you know that, this is what I've learned. If you run from that problem, your problem will outlast you. That whatever you're running from, you can think of the thing that you're running from is like a marathon runner and you're a sprinter. You can get away temporarily, but it's eventually going to catch you.
Right, because if you're running from, like, specifically if it's relationship based, then there are going to be other people that are like that in the other organization or the other job.
That's right.
You've got to learn to deal with all kinds of people.
Solve that problem where you are.
Right.
Solve that problem where you are and get that addressed. Now, once you solve that problem, you feel comfortable about it, and then you still want to leave. Okay, now you're leaving from a position of health.
Now, you also have the leaving because I had bad feedback from a boss, bad performance review, bad whatever.
Which is usually a lot of times is the bad day, right? I had a bad day because I got bad feedback. Well, have you thought through the feedback? Your boss is probably trying to help you. Not people. We've covered negative feedback on the podcast before. People don't wake up and be like, I can't wait. Most people don't wake up in the morning and be like, I can't wait to just trash somebody and feel better about myself. People don't like doing that.
Well, and there are phases to receiving the negative feedback, because for me, as a writer, I get negative feedback all the time. And I open up that piece of paper and it says, we didn't like this and we didn't like this, we didn't like this. I immediately go into that, well, that's just because you're an idiot. Just because you don't know talent. I don't understand. That's your problem, not my problem. And I will fuss and gripe and complain and gripe. And then I will put it away. And the next day, I will open up the piece of paper and go,
oh, they were right.
Oh,
right.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess maybe.
Well, and I think the thing to remember here is there's a figure of merit with every piece of feedback.
Right.
And I think you have to remind yourself that when you're in the throes of receiving the feedback. I think we talk about emotional intelligence or emotional EQ. That really is the key to me. Is I have to stop when I'm getting that feedback and you get flushed in the face. We've talked about it before. It feels warm in the room all of a sudden. Stop, calm yourself and say there's a figure of merit to every piece of feedback.
Right.
Every piece of feedback. Sometimes it's a really small figure of merit. Maybe that person just doesn't like you, but there's some figure of merit to it. You have to stop yourself and say, I'm going to listen to this and get better. I'll tell you what you don't do. Every time you get negative feedback, if you keep changing jobs, I won't hire you. Yeah. If I'm looking at a resume and I'm trying to hire somebody and I can see you've been in 3 jobs in 3 years,
right? You
know what I'm buying is a rental.
Yeah.
Hard pass. I'm not interested.
Right. And the truth is that these people may still be trying to find themselves. They may still be trying to figure out where, but it still doesn't look good.
It doesn't.
And you've got to be ready to address the question why.
Yeah. So I think you want to, and only that person can really properly answer that question. That's why the best way I could boil it down into a statement is leave from a position of health.
Right.
Leave in a spot where you know, okay, you know what? I'm healthy. I understand mentally where my value is and what I'm trying to do. The Venn diagram's moving this way. The focus or priority is moving this way. And I'm here. Those are cases that might make sense. What doesn't is I'm just going to jump because I just don't like this person.
Right.
That's just going to show up somewhere else.
Right.
It's just going to pop up again on you.
Right. And whatever feedback you get, whatever is going on, I think that there is, if you can take the grain of truth that's in there and learn from it and grow from it, then it helps you as you move forward.
Which ties into the other case of why someone shouldn't leave. Someone got a promotion over you. Yeah. This is another common one that I see. Well, they got promoted and I didn't, and so I'm bailing, right? Okay, there are scenarios where maybe that person was a 1 in terms of maybe they're like on a 10 scale, they're a 9 future leadership potential and you're an 8.
Right.
Maybe changing to another team or another company might make sense to give yourself some opportunity. I doubt that's what's happening. This is probably an emotional response to being turned down. What happens if you go to that other company, whatever reason they had for not promoting you, have you learned that?
Right.
Do you understand that? Have you taken that opportunity to self-reflect and figure out what you should learn from that?
Right.
Now, let's say you've taken that time and then you're still interested in making a change. That's leaving from a position of health.
Right. And when you have the negative feedback, when somebody else has gotten a promotion, any of that kind of stuff happens, don't attack it that day.
Yeah.
You've got to cool off, because if you go in there and talk to your boss on that day, you're going to say things that you regret.
Absolutely.
You may not have a job option.
That's the opposite. That is the opposite of emotional intelligence.
Right.
You need to go cool down. Don't send the email, whatever,
Okay, so how do you talk yourself off those ledges? You personally, how do you talk yourself off those ledges?
Separate from whatever the thing that's creating that emotion.
Okay.
Right. So I just finished my workday, and there was some email things that I'm looking at, and and I'm tired. It's been a long day. And at
Right.
the end of the day, I know my response is probably not going to be as good as it should be. I could tell because we were talking about something, and you said, yeah, we were talking about kid related stuff and in the afternoon. And you were like, well, that's pretty aggressive. You might not want to word it that way to your youngest child. And I was like, okay, I'm probably just tired and I'm being a little too terse. And so that's time for me to not respond to any more of these emails
Right.
unless I get some sort of emergency phone call, and I'll be a little more collected in the morning and I'll be good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it comes back to being able to be stoic, right? In that moment, be stoic and then process it on your
Well, you
own.
want to think rationally, not emotionally.
Right.
You want to think about this in a rational way. Now, we're sounding like everybody should stay in their job and just take a beating. That's what this sounds like so far. That's not the message.
No.
We're just saying you need to leave from a position of health. Okay. Let's talk about, when does it make sense to make a change? When does it
Right.
make sense to leave? What about major philosophical gaps between what you want and what the organization wants, and what your company wants or needs, right? So that's kind of that Venn diagram. And I've seen this. I've seen a company change direction and they say, we're not like let me give a really generic example. If you work at a place and your specialty is ice cream and you're one of the best ice cream designers or ice cream makers in the world, and your company is big into that, and all of a sudden they say, we're not doing ice cream anymore. You
Right.
need to get your resume together, man. You should have had it already and probably should have saw the writing on that wall. The thing is, it's never that paradigm. What
Right.
you'll see is the ice cream budget start to decrease. You'll start to see, well, we're going to shift some resources over in this other area. They're never going to come out and say, we hate you and we hate what you do. That's never how this works. You start to see some of those early indications that maybe this is being deprioritized. And then it's your choice. You have to decide, well, I'm going to go learn to also make whatever, if it's not, what's something else besides ice cream that wouldn't be relevant. Maybe they're now focused on donuts. This is awful, but you get the idea. You decide, do I want to go develop specialty there and take my skills there, or do I want to go someplace that values my ice cream skills?
But as soon as that budget starts going down, that doesn't mean you immediately jump, right? You don't immediately leave.
No, it's time for self-evaluation.
Right. And some conversations.
Yes.
Because you need to know, okay, are we doing this change in the short term
Yeah.
and then we're going to come back to
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
Or sometimes
right.
there's training opportunities.
That's right. That's right. Because what happens if you go, you know what? I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm just going to bolt. And then you find out it was just a temporary glitch.
Right.
And that they were going to, and then the person you were training gets promoted as making twice as much money as you. It's maybe better to hold tight, make a rational decision, collect information, learn. It's an opportunity to ask questions. Hey, the budget I see shifting here, and the prioritization seems to be shifting. Is, what kind of long-term direction? How should I perceive that?
Right. And being able to ask those kinds of questions also makes you look more in leadership. And
Absolutely.
More,
Yeah, because those
You're
are rational
forward-thinking.
questions to ask. They're not emotional questions. They're just
Right.
rational questions. Yeah. What about when you and your family just straight benefit from a change? You're
Right.
not in a place where you're unhealthy. You're not running from anything. But there's lots of examples here where we could talk about where you just straight benefit from a change. The friend of mine I was talking about
Right.
financially benefits from this.
Yes.
Right? There's nothing wrong with that.
And your friend didn't have to change houses, didn't have to change school districts for the kids, didn't have
Yeah.
to. It was just like,
If you
now I have more
got a
money.
phone call tomorrow with a 50% bump in pay, and you don't have to move, and that company after you has a really strong background and a history, I think we'd all be like, yeah, man, let's jump on that, right?
right. But you have to look at all of the details.
Yes.
I mean, you really do, because there's the cost of living from state to state
Yes.
changes, and the benefit package may change.
Insurance,
and-
overall package. Don't just
Absolutely.
look at the base, because that's something I've seen recruiters would be like, oh, well, we got this really great deal for you. You're going to get a 20% increase. By the way, all the perks you were used to before are gone.
Right.
And you work 8 to 5.
Right.
Right. And there's no negotiation.
There's
around
no
that.
autonomy.
Okay. I'm looking for autonomy here.
Right.
I want to let's talk about results, not effort. Right. So
Right.
that wouldn't work for me. So you need to look at the overall package, but you still may find something that just straight benefits you. It's a better opportunity. Right. And this is where I think that complacency and the fear of failure, you need to challenge yourself there. Are there, like I have to all the time, is there an opportunity out there that might be better than what I'm doing? Right. And be open to have a conversation. That doesn't make you a bad employee.
Right.
That makes you a better employee.
And it's not just about money. I
That's
mean,
right.
our economics teacher in high school, he called it utils of satisfaction.
Yeah.
How many utils of satisfaction are you getting from doing this job?
Yeah.
All of that has to work in there. It's not just about money.
Yeah, I agree. What about when you just come to the realization that I just don't want to do this anymore? Right. I've seen that
yeah.
happen with employees when I challenge and I go, what's going on? We're late on these things. And
Right.
like, I'm not sensing a whole lot of
Want to.
passion. I hate this job. All right. Now I got something to work with. Like
Right.
if you know you hate it, what are you doing?
Right.
We need to make a transition. Right.
Right.
And if you yourself come to the realization, I'm not talking about from one bad day, but
Right.
if you look and you said, it's been 6 months. When was the last time you enjoyed what you were doing? Right. Now, here's the part we had an interesting discussion about. You still have bills to pay.
That's exactly
So,
right.
or maybe you're okay with cutting your bills. Maybe that's all right. Maybe you're willing to, I'm going to sell my house and live in a trailer. That's perfectly fine. You just need to be conscious of that and plan accordingly. If it makes financial sense for you to go make a transition, then maybe you're okay to make sacrifices there and you're going to be willing to do those consciously.
But there are some jobs nobody wants to do. I am guessing that our trash collector never dreamed as a child that he would grow up and be a trash collector.
Yeah.
But he's paying his bills being a trash collector.
Sure.
Now, my hope is that he has something outside of that
Yeah.
that brings him joy and
Sure.
passion and is still, bringing some satisfaction to his life,
Sure.
right? And maybe he loves being a trash collector.
But maybe he's got a dream about doing something else.
Sometimes.
Maybe,
But sometimes you got to pay the bills.
Yes.
Until you can figure out how to
Yeah.
get your Venn diagram
So
aligned.
this is where I go crazy when I hear I read, these self-help authors and people talking about this. They're like, well, you just need to chase your dreams. Well, dreams don't pay the electric bill.
That's right.
Right. I think there's got to be some balance here between dreams and reality.
Right.
Right. So it's not so black and white that you quit your job and decide to go, be a painter. Right.
Right.
I don't know what a better example would be, but I don't know what the success rate of people painting that are paying the electric bill, but it's probably not outrageous. But you
don't
don't
know,
have
man.
to quit your job to do that.
Right.
Do it on the side.
Right.
Right.
I mean, we're talking to our kids all the time about what their career ambitions are and everything. And we keep telling them there's a lot of money in trades. If you are willing to pump septic,
Yeah.
if you are willing to be a plumber, they all roll their eyes. I don't want to do that. I hear you.
Plumbers can make good money, man.
You can make really
Especially
good money
if you own the
doing
business
that.
yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can make great money doing that. It
That's
doesn't
right.
have to be your passion
right.
project. You can
That's
have
right.
something else on the outside that is
Absolutely. Yeah.
floating your boat.
And it really comes down to, when you talk about when does it make sense to leave, it's what do you want to do? That's been the challenge for me. If I can answer that question, I'm usually pretty laser focused. But until I know what I want to do, I'm just kind of bouncing around and I'm chasing one high to one low or something like that.
Right. And I don't think I've ever really shared a whole lot of my background on the podcast. So let me just throw this out there. We got married before we went to the university. Between junior college and university, Brent and I got married.
It's crazy talk.
It is crazy talk.
Way too young.
We, you were still a teenager when we got married.
I was 19
It's
years
crazy.
old. Crazy talk.
But after the university, we went straight to work. And I went to a corporate job and you went to a corporate job and we bought nothing. Zilch, zero. And in a year, we had both of our college degrees paid off. And as soon as we got that last bill paid off, I said, I don't really want to do this corporate job. And I quit.
Yeah.
I quit to go do what I was actually passionate about.
Yeah.
And you continued at the corporate job because that's what you were enjoying for a few years, and then things transitioned there as well. But there was something powerful about having the debt paid off and then going, okay, who do I want to be? What's my purpose?
You're getting into there's phases here. It's not like
Very
all
much.
one thing in your life, right?
Right.
Great principle, great concept. And it's a very encouraging thing for people to think about. Because if you're uneasy and unsettled with what you're doing right now, that doesn't mean you're a failure at decisions you've made in your life. That just means that there's something stirring about what's next.
Right. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think that you and I have seen people make is living by the means of whatever the finances are that's coming in.
Sure.
And then you are tied
Yeah.
to that job,
That's how they get you.
right?
Yeah.
When you are in debt up to your eyeballs,
Yeah.
and the credit card bills are coming in every month, and
Yeah.
the mortgage bill, and
Right.
everything, yeah, you're stuck.
Yeah, you're motivated to keep doing whatever you're doing to bring that paycheck in, right?
Right.
And here's what's interesting is you become you're not as good of an employee
That's
because
true.
you're thinking about the mortgage payment and whatever bills you have, and you become a yes person.
Right.
You just say, oh yeah, whatever keeps the check coming in. When in reality, sometimes you got to challenge things.
Right.
Sometimes
And that's
you
where
gotta-
the complacency sets in.
Absolutely. You got to challenge stuff.
It's
and
a
be like,
trap.
It is. So it's just kind of, you got to balance a little bit of both of them. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Have we addressed this? I don't know. Maybe we close with this idea behind one of the final questions that I asked my friend who has gone through this transition recently. I asked, how will you approach a possible job change in the future differently? Do you think you would approach it differently? Because this was the first time they went through this. And a couple things they said, they would definitely utilize recruiters. And I think it's a great idea.
Right,
I think there's no harm in having a cup of coffee and networking with people.
Right.
You need to be prepared to say no, because you might get a hard sales pitch, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there ain't no harm in an interview I have people all the time say, hey, this person's looking for a job. They want to talk to you. Are you okay with that? Man, I don't care about somebody asking me for a job. Ain't no harm in having a cup of coffee and getting to know each other. Now, you just have to accept the fact that I'll probably tell you I'm not hiring right now, but it's good to know you because I might in the future.
And it's funny. Those are also act as appreciation for you. It lets you know.
Yeah.
It lets you know that you are still wanted. Your
That's
skills
right.
are still needed.
Get your
You
resume
can
polished up.
Yeah, you can turn down the job, but it's
Absolutely.
like somebody else still wants
Yeah.
me.
Thinking about other opportunities, that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
That's a very healthy thing. And challenging this thought process of that Venn diagram, I think that's a thing that once a year you probably should revisit it. Every year you should be asking, what are the skills that I offer that somebody's willing to pay for? And what are the things that I enjoy doing the most? And how do I find the right center of the the center of that Venn diagram to enable that? I think that's a good thing you should always be asking yourself that. Where's the sweet spot?
And if you don't know what those things are for your life, we've also had a guest, Ken Yonke, that came on, and he was talking about helping people find their purpose.
I think you can find that why first. It probably
yeah.
helps you find that, right? And that's really what that episode is about.
That's exactly
If
right.
you can answer that. When I had really great feedback from a friend that said, man, I'm in the middle of that process, and going through and listening to that episode, affected me. I was like, yeah, I need to rethink this.
Because sometimes what you think your talents are
Yeah.
and what you think that people are willing to pay for
Yes.
and what is the reality of the situation,
Yeah.
you may not even realize how good you are at something.
Absolutely. And if you just do whatever you've been doing forever, you're going to keep getting what you've had in the past. And
Are you happy?
Are you happy? Do you love that? Then that's cool. Good for you. That's awesome. But I want you to love what you do. That doesn't mean you get to be an astronaut like I wanted to be. I don't know if that's what I wanted to play shortstop for the Houston Astros.
Right.
That ship has sailed. I can play on MLB The Show.
Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
play. Then I've got my name grafted in. And I think when I played a full season the other year, I think I had,
Now, do they teach
I had
you how to
140
steal
home runs
signs?
in 1 year.
Do they teach you how to steal signs on the?
Come on now. Don't give me this anti-Astros shenanigan business. World Series champs. That's all I got to say.
Asterisk.
I ain't
asterisk.
listening to that. I ain't listening to that. Minutia. I'm editing all this out. Have a good week, folks. Love what you do. Think about some of the concepts here. When is it time to leave? If you disagree with me, I'd like to hear that part. If you agree with me, that's fine too. You can let us know. Have a good week.